"Is this your first time flying, sir?" the TSA agent asked, tilting his head like he was talking to a confused child. General Marcus Reed paused, his hand hovering over the plastic bin where he had just placed his polished dress shoes. His uniform, dark blue with silver buttons and a chest full of hard-earned medals, caught the morning light streaming through the airport's wide glass walls. His jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. Passengers in line turned their heads. A few chuckled. One woman whispered behind her hand to her husband. "He looks lost." Marcus said nothing. He just smiled slightly, the kind of smile that knew patience could move mountains. The TSA agent, a young white man with a buzz cut and too much bravado, waved a hand impatiently. "Come on, buddy. You gotta move faster. Lot of people here who know what they're doing." Marcus nodded once, slow and respectful, and continued through the metal detector. It beeped loudly. Another agent, a woman this time, stepped forward. "Hands up! Step back! Step back!" she barked like he was dangerous. Marcus obeyed, hands in the air, posture firm, chin lifted. "Sir, do you have anything in your pockets?" she asked harshly. "No, ma'am," he replied, voice deep and steady. They patted him down aggressively, hands slapping his arms, legs, waist. The agent yanked his ID badge from around his neck without asking. Her face shifted the moment she read it. United States Air Force, 4-star General, Marcus L. Reed. But pride and power were stubborn things. Instead of apologizing, she dropped the badge onto the table like it was trash. "You can go," she said stiffly. Marcus picked up the badge, brushing off invisible dust. His dark eyes locked onto hers, a stare so sharp it could cut steel. But again, he said nothing. Not yet. He gathered his things: shoes, belt, watch, duffel bag. Each movement deliberate, almost ceremonial. The crowded checkpoint buzzed around him. Families chattering, businessmen grumbling, loudspeaker announcements crackling overhead. But in Marcus's world, everything slowed down. He moved through it all like a ghost. As he pulled on his shoes, another passenger, a white man in a business suit, leaned over and muttered, "Maybe next time. Dress normal if you don't want to get stopped." Marcus straightened, towering over him, without a word. The man blinked, then quickly turned away, pretending to check his phone. Marcus adjusted his cuffs, his stars glinting under the fluorescent lights. Then, calm as ever, he walked toward the nearest gate agent, who was chatting lazily behind the counter. "Excuse me," Marcus said, voice smooth but firm. "Could you please direct me to your airport operations manager?" The young woman blinked, caught off guard. Why?" "I need to speak to someone. Immediately." She stammered, reaching for the phone. Marcus stepped aside, watching planes taxi across the tarmac. Outside, the world moved with precision. Inside, it fumbled and stumbled, unaware that one man could change everything in a heartbeat. 5 minutes later, a short man with thinning hair and a cheap navy blazer hustled toward him. Hi, I'm Greg Simmons, Airport Operations Manager. How can I help you, sir?" His smile was wide but nervous. Marcus pulled a slim black phone from his duffel. No brand logos. Military issue. He tapped once. A secure line opened. "This is General Reed. Get me NORAD Command and FAA Regional Director, Priority 1, he said quietly into the phone. Greg Simmons' smile faltered. His hands fidgeted. The call connected fast, faster than any civilian would ever believe. "General." "Reed," a voice crackled through the earpiece. "How can we assist?" Marcus turned slightly, his voice low but lethal. "I'm standing in Terminal B of Hamilton National Airport. I've just been profiled, disrespected, and mishandled by security. I want all departures from this terminal grounded until further notice." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Understood, sir. Orders being executed now." Marcus hung up. Around him, the airport's white noise began to shift. Gate agents frowned at their screens. Pilots leaned in to talk urgently with dispatchers. Passengers stared at the big departure boards as flights blinked from on time to delayed, one after another. Greg Simmons wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. General, sir, maybe we can work this out? I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding. Marcus tilted his head, studying him the way a hawk studies a field mouse. A misunderstanding, he repeated softly. That's what you call it. Greg opened his mouth, but no words came out. Marcus stepped closer, voice dropping into a gravelly whisper only Greg could hear. I built my career on discipline, Mr. Simmons, on respect, on service. I didn't climb to the highest rank a black man can reach in the United States military to be treated like a criminal because of the color of my skin. Greg swallowed hard. Sirens sounded somewhere deep in the terminal. A team of men in dark suits hurried toward them, FAA officials, security supervisors, and a few red-faced TSA directors. Marcus crossed his arms over his chest, metals shining, boots planted firm on the polished floor. This was just the beginning. Sir, if we had known who you were, this never would have happened, stammered the head of TSA security, a tall man named Peter Collins, sweat shining on his bald forehead. General Marcus Reed didn't flinch. He stood still, calm, hands behind his back, the posture of a man who had commanded entire bases, led soldiers into battle, and buried friends under folded flags. You didn't know, Marcus repeated, voice low and even. So that's your excuse. The gathered officials shifted nervously in the growing circle around him. Passengers nearby were starting to notice. Whispers snaked through the terminal like smoke. That's the guy who got stopped. Why's everyone freaking out? Is he some kind of VIP? Marcus stepped forward slowly, letting the weight of his presence settle over them. Peter Collins cleared his throat. Look, sir, we train our agents to be thorough. It wasn't personal. A soft, dry chuckle escaped Marcus's throat, more a breath than a laugh. Not personal, he echoed. Behind him, the giant departure screens flickered again. More flights now delayed, more gate changes announced over the intercom in nervous, stuttering voices. Sir, Greg Simmons, the operations manager, cut in hastily. Maybe we can move somewhere more private to discuss this? Marcus turned his head slightly, fixing him with a glance that pinned him to the spot. No, Marcus said simply. We're going to have this conversation right here. Passengers slowed down as they passed. Some pulled out their phones. A few were already filming. A young black woman in a denim jacket whispered to her boyfriend, He's somebody important. Look how they're sweating. Marcus stayed silent for a beat, letting the discomfort stretch like a tightening rope. Then he spoke, measured, controlled, but cutting. Let me explain something, Marcus said, voice carrying easily over the murmur of the crowd. You stopped me because you saw a black man in uniform and decided he didn't belong. You patted me down like a criminal. You spoke to me like a child. The TSA director opened his mouth, but Marcus held up a hand, silencing him. You saw skin before you saw stars, Marcus said, tapping the silver 4-star pins on his shoulder with one strong finger. A hush fell over the area. Even the rolling suitcases seemed quieter. This, Marcus continued, is not just about me. It's about every person who walks into an airport and is treated like they don't belong because of the color of their skin, the clothes they wear, or the way they carry themselves. A teenage boy standing nearby lowered his phone, staring at Marcus like he was seeing a superhero come to life. Greg Simmons fidgeted. Sir, we're deeply sorry. We'll file an internal report, retrain the staff. Marcus cut him off with a sharp look. A report? His voice dropped lower, almost a growl. Do you think one report fixes the humiliation your people dish out every day? A retraining session makes up for years of bias baked into your systems? The officials around him looked like they'd rather disappear into the polished tile floor. Marcus took a breath, calming himself. I didn't ground your flights because I was angry, he said, voice softer now. I did it because sometimes power only listens when money and time are threatened. And today, your airport is losing both. As if on cue, the PA system blared again. Attention. All passengers, we apologize for the inconvenience. Due to operational issues, flights are delayed. Please check with your airline representative for updates. Passengers groaned. Lines at the gates swelled. Tempers frayed. Marcus turned back to Greg Simmons and Peter Collins. I'm not here for your apology, he said. I'm here for change. Peter wiped his forehead again. What kind of change, sir? Marcus held up 2 fingers. First, a public apology, not some back-office press release. Right here. Now. Greg's mouth opened and closed like a gasping fish. And second, Marcus continued, a full review of your TSA practices at this airport, with oversight from an independent civil rights organization. Peter Collins looked like he might faint. Marcus stepped closer, his shadow falling across them. You can agree, he said, low and dangerous. Or I can make sure every major news outlet in the country knows exactly how Hamilton National treats its passengers of color. Phones were already recording. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook Live. The story was writing itself. The choice was an illusion. They were cornered. Greg Simmons nodded stiffly. Oh, okay, we'll arrange the statement. Marcus nodded once. Good. You have 5 minutes. He turned and walked away from them, standing at the center of the terminal like a monument carved from stone. The officials scrambled. Behind the scenes, phones rang, emails flew, managers barked orders. Somewhere, someone printed out a hastily written statement and shoved it into Greg's shaking hands. 5 minutes later, Greg climbed onto a small chair near the main concourse, holding a portable microphone. His voice trembled as it echoed across the terminal. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Hamilton National Airport and the Transportation Security Administration, we wish to publicly apologize for the inappropriate treatment of General Marcus Reed this morning. We recognize that racial profiling has no place in our airport or our society. We are committed to making immediate changes to ensure that every passenger is treated with respect, dignity, and fairness. He finished quickly, stepping down. The apology wasn't perfect. It wasn't enough. But it was public. It was real. And the internet was already eating it alive. Marcus stood still, accepting the apology with a nod. Not for himself, but for every young black man and woman who ever felt small in places built to keep them small. This was just the first step. Justice was a long road, and Marcus Reed had just started walking it. Sir, please, can we talk in my office? Greg Simmons begged, falling into step behind Marcus as he walked down the wide terminal hallway. Marcus didn't answer right away. His boots struck the tile floor with a steady, echoing rhythm. Every step was deliberate. Every breath was measured. The airport was a mess now. Flights frozen, angry passengers buzzing like wasps around the gates, staff scrambling behind counters. Greg practically tripped over his own feet trying to keep up. His navy blazer swung awkwardly around his shoulders, sweat soaking the collar. Marcus finally stopped near a large window overlooking the runways. Planes sat idle, lined up like fallen soldiers. You want to talk now, Marcus said calmly, turning to face him. But when your staff humiliated me 20 minutes ago, no one wanted to listen. Greg's face flushed pink. I didn't know, sir. None of us did. That's the problem, Marcus said, voice still low, but steel underneath. You don't see people like me until we make you see us. Behind them, passengers dragged suitcases in slow, frustrated lines. The crowd was growing restless. Voices rose. Phones stayed up, recording everything. This story was no longer just contained to Hamilton National Airport. It was about to go national. Greg licked his lips nervously. Sir, we really want to make this right. Please. Let's find a way forward. Marcus watched him for a long, cold moment. Then he nodded once. Fine, Marcus said. Get your PR director, your head of security, and your TSA liaison. 15 minutes. Conference room. Make sure the cameras stay on. Greg nearly stumbled trying to bow and run at the same time. Yes, sir. Right away. Marcus turned back to the window, staring out at the planes, the empty runways, the long silver wings gleaming under the morning sun. His reflection stared back at him in the glass, the face of a man who had given his life to a country that still didn't know how to see him. A voice spoke softly behind him. Sir, excuse me? Marcus turned. It was the young black woman who had been filming earlier, the one in the denim jacket. She stood a few feet away, her phone lowered, her hands trembling slightly. "I just wanted to say, thank you," she said, voice catching, "for standing up." Marcus softened. His posture eased a fraction. "What's your name?" he asked. "Danielle," she said. "Danielle Brooks." He nodded. "Danielle, never let anyone make you small." Her eyes welled up. She nodded back fiercely, wiping a tear quickly with the sleeve of her jacket before slipping back into the crowd. Marcus turned back to the window. The world outside looked the same, but something inside the terminal was shifting. The invisible walls that had been there, the ones made of assumptions, suspicion, disrespect, they were starting to crack. 15 minutes later, Marcus stood at the head of a long glass conference table. Sunlight poured in through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the room. Greg Simmons, Peter Collins, the TSA director, and a tight-faced woman in a gray suit with a public affairs badge sat across from him, looking like students, called into the principal's office. Marcus placed his duffel on the floor and leaned forward, resting his hands flat on the table. "This is not about one incident," he began, voice even. "This is about a pattern, a disease running quietly through your airport every day." The PR woman cleared her throat. "Sir, we understand your frustration." "It's not frustration," Marcus cut in. "It's reality. Silence. You treat every black traveler, every Muslim traveler, every brown-skinned person who doesn't fit your idea of safe like a threat." Marcus continued. "You humiliate them, delay them, question them more, search them harder. You pretend it's random." He leaned closer. "We both know it's not." Greg opened his mouth to object, but Marcus's stare froze him mid-breath. "I'm not here for apologies," Marcus said. "I'm here for demands." He pulled a folded sheet of paper from his uniform pocket and slid it across the table. It was a list, simple, direct, non-negotiable. Mandatory anti-bias training for all TSA and airport staff, conducted by independent civil rights organizations. Random, monthly audits of passenger screenings, reported publicly. A permanent complaint hotline for profiling, with real follow-up procedures. Diversity hiring goals for management-level positions. Immediate public release of today's incident report. Uncensored. The officials paled as they read it. This is going to cause a media storm," the PR woman whispered. Marcus nodded once. "Good." Peter Collins wiped his forehead again. "Sir, we'll need time." "You have 24 hours, Marcus said sharply. "Or I file a formal discrimination complaint with the FAA, Department of Transportation, Homeland Security, and the national press." He let the words hang in the air, heavy and undeniable. 24 hours. Not a minute more. Greg Simmons nodded, slowly. "We understand, General." Marcus picked up his duffel and slung it over his shoulder. "One more thing," he said as he reached the door. They all looked up. Marcus turned, a quiet fire in his eyes. "You're not fixing this because you care about me," he said. "You're fixing it because the world is watching." And with that, he left them sitting there, small, sweating, and very, very aware of just how much they had underestimated the man who stood before them. "Sir, we have a situation brewing at Gate 12, a frantic voice crackled over Greg Simmons' walkie-talkie. Greg squeezed his eyes shut for a second. His headache was pounding now, a steady, angry drumbeat behind his temples. He shot a glance at Peter Collins, who stood stiffly by the window, arms crossed, lips a thin line of stress. Greg clicked the button. "What kind of situation?" A crowd, chanting. "It's getting louder. Security can't calm them down." Greg cursed under his breath. Marcus Reed's slow, deliberate walk through the terminal hadn't just turned heads. It had lit a match. Passengers who had witnessed the racial profiling, employees who had overheard the tension, black travelers who had seen too many moments like this and had finally found a spark to gather around. Gate 12 was swelling with energy. Not angry, but heavy, tired, fed-up energy, and they weren't moving. Outside the glass walls, the planes still sat motionless on the tarmac like giant metal statues. Inside, change was no longer a whisper. It was becoming a roar. Marcus adjusted the strap of his duffel bag as he approached the edge of the growing crowd. Danielle Brooks was there again, standing near the front, holding her phone high. Beside her was an older black man in a gray suit and hat, eyes blazing with pride. Mothers with strollers, students with backpacks, even some staff in airport uniforms, arms crossed over their chests, faces set. The chant started soft, almost shy. Respect, dignity, justice. Again. Respect, dignity, justice. Marcus stopped a few feet away, hands slipping into his pockets. He said nothing. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't call attention to himself. He just stood there, a silent pillar of strength, and somehow that made the chant grow louder. Respect, dignity, justice. Security guards hovered on the edges, exchanging nervous glances. They looked at each other, waiting for someone higher up to tell them what to do. Marcus felt a tap on his shoulder. It was a young white gate agent, early 20s, freckles dusting her nose, eyes wide with uncertainty. "Sir," she said quietly, almost apologetically. "The airport director is asking, would you be willing to come upstairs? There's a private meeting room." Marcus met her gaze, steady, unreadable. He shook his head once. "I'm right where I need to be," he said. The girl flushed red, nodded, and hurried away. Across the hall, reporters began arriving, some from local stations, others national. Big cameras on tall tripods, microphones with corporate logos. They circled the crowd like vultures scenting a storm. Marcus saw it happening and still he stood still, calm, unbothered. Let them come, he thought. Let them see. Inside the conference room upstairs, Greg Simmons was almost shouting into the phone. "No, you don't understand," he said, voice cracking. "It's not just one guy. It's a whole situation. We need someone from the FAA to intervene. Now!" He slammed the phone down and paced the room, tie yanked loose from his collar. Peter Collins leaned heavily on the table. "Maybe we should have just escorted him out quietly before this got big." Greg spun around. "And escalate it? Are you insane? He grounded the flights without even blinking. You think security could have manhandled a 4-star general without the whole country burning down this airport?" Peter muttered something under his breath. The PR woman, pale and shaking, stepped. "Joe, we need a statement, a strong one, something that sounds like real change. If the media spins this against us before we control the narrative, we're dead." Greg squeezed the bridge of his nose. Dead wasn't an exaggeration. Airports lived and died by public trust. One viral incident could tank traffic, bring lawsuits, trigger federal investigations. Sponsors would back out. Airlines would reroute. Hamilton, National would become a ghost town. Greg looked at the clock. 15 minutes before the next scheduled press conference. His hands were trembling. He knew exactly who held all the power now, and it wasn't the people in this room. Downstairs, the crowd had tripled. Airport police arrived, hands on their belts, radios crackling. But they didn't move aggressively. Not yet. They could feel it too, that this wasn't a riot. It was something quieter, heavier, more dangerous because it carried dignity instead of violence. The kind of dignity you couldn't handcuff without making yourself the villain on every screen in America. Marcus stepped forward finally, his voice cutting through the chants. "Thank you," he said, deep and clear. The crowd quieted instantly, like a single living creature holding its breath. "I didn't ask you to come here," he said. "You chose to stand because you knew something wasn't right." Heads nodded, murmurs of agreement. Marcus paused, looking around slowly. "I've worn this uniform for 30 years, he said, tapping the Silver Eagle badge on his chest. "I've fought wars overseas. I've buried friends. I've sworn to defend this country with my life." He let the words settle, and still, in my own country, in my own airports, some see only the color of my skin first. A ripple of emotion moved through the crowd. I'm not here today to ask for favors, Marcus said. I'm demanding change. For every traveler, for every American. The cameras caught everything, every word, every breath, every face lit with the raw, painful recognition of a truth too many had carried silently for too long. Upstairs, Greg Simmons watched the live feed on a conference room monitor. He rubbed his temples, feeling the walls close in. Downstairs, Marcus Reed stood tall under the blinding fluorescent lights, the whole world watching. And for the first time in a very long time, the people who usually looked away had no choice but to see. "Sir, you're trending," Danielle Brooks said, her phone held up, her thumb scrolling in disbelief. Marcus Reed glanced sideways at her but said nothing. His arms stayed folded over his chest, boots firmly planted, gaze steady on the growing press. Huddle at Gate 12. The hashtag #Justice at Hamilton was exploding. Clips of the airport apology. Footage of Marcus standing tall in his uniform. Passengers chanting. Newscasters stumbling over themselves trying to explain how a decorated black general was stopped, profiled, and nearly humiliated at a major American airport. Marcus didn't crack a smile. Didn't so much as blink. He hadn't done this for likes. Not for interviews, not for viral fame. He did it because for every Marcus Reed there were thousands who had no medals, no stars, just hurt, swallowed quietly in terminals, lobbies, sidewalks, and stores across the country. And today, just for today, that silence had ended. Inside the conference room upstairs, Greg Simmons was barking orders like a man trying to bail water out of a sinking ship with his bare hands. "I want full cooperation with the media," he said, voice rising. "Positive messaging. Emphasize our commitment to change." Peter Collins looked ready to snap. "What if they ask about other profiling complaints? You know there's been a few." "Denial," Greg said sharply. "We don't acknowledge patterns. We acknowledge this incident and this incident only." The PR woman tapped on her tablet, sweat beading at her temples. "There's a request from CNN, and ABC, and BuzzFeed, and..." She broke off, swallowing. "And the NAACP just issued a statement condemning Hamilton National." Greg cursed under his breath. It was spinning out faster than even he had imagined. Not just a local story, a national one. And standing in the middle of it, calm as a mountain in a hurricane, was Marcus Reed. At Gate 12, the energy kept rising. Not with violence, not with chaos, but with a quiet, powerful unity. Passengers from all walks of life, black, white, Latino, Asian, were linking arms. Mothers with babies on their hips, elderly veterans with caps over their silver hair, students with laptops, and earbuds dangling. Respect, dignity, justice. The chant rose again. Respect, dignity, justice. Tears welled in Danielle's eyes as she filmed. Nearby, a little boy tugged on his mother's hand and pointed at Marcus. "Is he a superhero?" the boy asked, wide-eyed. The mother smiled through her own tears. "Yeah, baby," she whispered. "Today he is." Marcus exhaled slowly through his nose, chest rising under his uniform. He hadn't asked for this attention. He didn't want it. But now that it was here, he understood something deep and cold and true. They would never give respect. It had to be claimed, and today it was. The airport intercom crackled again. "Attention passengers. We are working diligently to resume operations. Thank you for your patience." Marcus watched as Greg Simmons, Peter Collins, and the PR director hustled back onto the concourse. A small portable podium had been hastily set up near the Starbucks. Camera crews swarmed. Greg stepped up, microphone shaking slightly in his hand. Marcus didn't move. He simply crossed his arms tighter across his chest, watching. Greg cleared. His throat, his voice wobbled under the bright camera lights. "We want to sincerely apologize once again to General Marcus Reed and to all passengers who have experienced discrimination or disrespect within our airport," Greg said. "Effective immediately, Hamilton National will be instituting new anti-bias training protocols, full transparency audits, and an independent passenger complaint review board." A ripple of whispers ran through the crowd. Marcus narrowed his eyes slightly. Greg continued, clinging desperately to his prepared lines. "We will hold ourselves accountable. Change must happen, and it begins today. He stepped back from the podium. The crowd didn't clap. They didn't boo either. They simply stared, waiting to see what Marcus would do. Marcus took one slow, deliberate step forward. The cameras turned, zooming in. He stood before the microphones, the press, the phones, the world. And for the first time that day, he let himself speak into the storm. "My name is General Marcus Reed," he said, voice clear and deep, steady as a drumbeat. "I have worn this uniform across deserts, oceans, and mountains for 30 years. I have buried friends. I have defended freedoms I don't always get to enjoy." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "But today," he said, "you reminded me why the fight isn't over." People leaned forward, drawn into every word. "I'm not here to shame," Marcus continued. "I'm here to demand better. For me, for every traveler, for every American who refuses to be small, invisible, or second class because of what they look like." He paused. No papers, no notes, just truth. "Accountability isn't a press conference," Marcus said. "It's action, and we'll be watching." He stepped back. The crowd erupted, not into wild cheers, but something deeper, heavier, a standing ovation made of gratitude, pain, pride, and promise. Tears ran freely now. The chant rose again, louder than ever before. Respect, dignity, justice. Marcus met Greg's eyes across the concourse. The airport director looked like he might collapse under the weight of it all. Good, Marcus thought. It was about time someone else carried the burden. As Marcus turned away, Danielle ran up beside him, breathless. "Sir," she said, "where are you going?" Marcus glanced down at her, the ghost of a smile crossing his face. "Home," he said simply. "I've got a lot of work to do." And with the eyes of a nation following his every step, General Marcus Reed walked calmly toward the sliding glass doors of Hamilton National Airport, leaving a crack in the walls that had held too many down for far too long. "General Reed, sir, over here. Can we get a statement?" A reporter from CNN shouted, sprinting to keep up with Marcus as he walked calmly through the automatic doors of Hamilton National Airport. Marcus didn't break stride. His boots hit the sidewalk with the same quiet force they had inside, every step steady, unbothered. "I've said what needed saying," he replied, deep voice cutting clean through the chaos behind him. The cameras kept rolling, desperate to catch, even a glance, a nod, anything. But Marcus had already decided. The real statement wasn't made at podiums, it was made in action, and he was just getting started. Across the street, black SUVs with dark-tinted windows pulled up. Two clean-cut men in suits stepped out quickly, scanning the area. They weren't airport security. They were federal. Marcus nodded once at them. They fell into step behind him without a word. Danielle Brooks watched from behind the glass doors, phone still recording, heart pounding. "He's not just walking away," she whispered to herself. "He's taking the fight with him." Inside the airport, chaos churned. Passengers demanded refunds. Airlines barked at gate agents. Social media fed on every dropped call, every delayed flight, every emotional soundbite. Greg Simmons slumped into a leather chair in the operations center, hands buried in his thinning hair. "This is bad," Peter Collins said beside him, voice hollow. "Really bad." Greg glared at the departure boards as more flights blinked from delayed to canceled. "If we don't get control of this story by tomorrow," Greg muttered, "Hamilton National is finished." The PR woman burst into the room, cheeks flushed, tablet shaking in her hands. "Sir," she gasped, "the White House just called." Greg bolted upright. "What?" "They want a briefing," she said, voice rising. "They're sending a Department of Transportation task force, and Homeland Security wants a statement about airport profiling across the country." Greg slumped back in his chair, throat dry. This wasn't just a PR nightmare anymore. It was a national reckoning, all because of one man who refused to lower his eyes and shuffle along. Meanwhile, Marcus sat silently in the back of the lead SUV as it pulled away from the airport. The young agent driving, barely 30, sharp suit, harder eyes, glanced at Marcus in the rearview mirror. "Sir," he said carefully, "that was one hell of a thing you did back there." Marcus didn't respond immediately. He watched the city roll by. Gleaming office towers, old brick neighborhoods, children playing basketball on cracked courts, all of it stitched together by invisible lines most people didn't even notice. Lines of power, lines of privilege, lines of fear. Marcus saw every single one. "I didn't do it for show," he said finally. "I know, sir," the agent said. A beat of silence. Then the agent added, almost shyly, "You gave a lot of folks hope today." Marcus's lips pressed into a thin line. Hope was good. Hope was powerful. But hope without action was a dying flame. "Turn the radio on," Marcus said. The agent clicked it on. The first voice they heard was a radio host, urgent and breathless. Breaking news. General Marcus Reed, the highest-ranking black officer in the U.S. Air Force, has ignited a national conversation after being wrongfully profiled at Hamilton National Airport earlier today. Marcus leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment, not to rest, but to gather himself. The next part would be harder, bigger, meaner, and absolutely necessary. Across the city, in living rooms and diners and barbershops, the footage played over and over, Marcus standing silently as the apology was read. Marcus speaking without anger but with undeniable strength. Passengers chanting behind him like a heartbeat too loud to ignore. Kids pointed at the TV. Elders nodded with slow, grim pride. Mothers wiped their eyes, clutching their children a little, tighter. They all understood something deep in their bones. Today wasn't about one man. It was about every time someone had been doubted, belittled, dismissed, and kept walking anyway. Today, the walking stopped. Today, they stood. And the country, for once, had no choice but to watch. At Hamilton National, Danielle sat cross-legged near Gate 12, still filming updates for her social media. Her video had already hit 500,000 views. Comments poured in. "This man is a legend." "Salute." "Shut that airport down." Finally, someone with real power making them listen. Respect, dignity, justice. Danielle smiled through her tears. She wasn't a lawyer. She wasn't a politician. She was just one voice. But today, voices mattered. And thanks to Marcus Reed, 1,000 silent ones had found their roar. As the SUVs pulled onto a quiet, tree-lined street, Marcus opened his eyes again. The federal agent glanced back. "Sir," he said, "they're ready for you." Marcus nodded once. Time to move. Time to build, because today wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. "General Reed, they're waiting inside," the agent said, holding the door open to a low, secure building tucked behind rows of government offices. Marcus stepped out of the SUV, boots striking the pavement with a solid, quiet authority. His uniform still sharp, his medals still gleaming, his presence now unmistakable. Inside the building, a meeting room buzzed with tension. Thick walls, no cameras, no reporters, just polished oak tables, a big American flag, and a room full of decision-makers. A senior Department of Transportation official adjusted her blazer nervously. A stern-faced Homeland Security deputy tapped a folder against the table. A Civil Rights Commission lawyer flipped through papers with rapid, agitated hands. Everyone stood when Marcus entered. Everyone. He walked to the head of the table without being invited, without being asked, and he sat down, folding his hands calmly, on the surface. The room settled into an uneasy silence. Finally, a gray-haired official cleared his throat. "General Reed, first, let us say, we deeply regret what occurred today." Marcus lifted an eyebrow but said nothing. He had heard enough empty regret for one lifetime. The official shifted. "There's intense public pressure. News outlets, civil rights groups, even several members of Congress are demanding action." Another official, a woman in a Navy dress suit, leaned forward urgently. "We have to be seen responding, General. Fast, decisively, before this spirals further." Marcus met her gaze. "It's already spiraling," he said coolly. "And responding for the sake of appearances is why this keeps happening." The room tensed. One man, younger, clean-cut Homeland Security badge pinned to his jacket, dared to ask, "Sir, what exactly do you want us to do?" Marcus's voice was calm, but the weight behind it filled the room like thunderclouds ready to split open. "Fix it," he said. "From the ground up." Murmurs rippled. Someone muttered, "That's not realistic." Marcus's stare snapped to him like a blade. "Neither is pretending the system's fair," he said. The murmurs died instantly. He leaned forward slightly, voice low but forceful. "I'm not here for performative apologies," Marcus said. "I'm here because this country's airports, the very gateways to its ideals of freedom and opportunity, are infected with quiet, casual, unspoken prejudice." He let it sit. He made them feel it. "I'm here because Hamilton National is not the exception. It's the rule. And if you don't tear the rot out now, all the way out, it will burn everything down." Across the table, the Civil Rights Commission. Lawyer straightened, tapping her pen against the table thoughtfully. "What are you proposing, General?" Marcus slid a slim folder across the table. Inside was a plan. Simple. Devastatingly clear. A new federal anti-profiling oversight office with real investigative power. Anonymous audits of security practices at every major airport in America. Whistleblower. Protections for TSA agents and airport staff who reported racial bias. Required publication of quarterly statistics on passenger stops, broken down by race, age, gender, mandatory civilian advisory boards at every airport. He had spent months building this quietly, long before today ever happened. Because Marcus Reed understood something most didn't. Change didn't come from outrage. Lone. It came from being ready when the door cracked open. One official skimmed the pages, face tightening. "This is ambitious," Marcus's voice cut through. "It's necessary." The senior official rubbed his chin. "We'd need the president's backing." "You'll have it," Marcus said. "Because tomorrow morning, if I don't see commitment, full commitment, I go public. Full interviews, full press conferences, full movement." He let it hang there like a live wire. Not a threat, a promise. A lawyer across the table paled visibly. The Homeland Security deputy licked his lips nervously. "Sir, we can begin drafting a task force directive immediately." Marcus nodded once. "Good." He rose smoothly from his chair, the whole room rising instinctively with him again. "This isn't a favor," Marcus said, voice like cold steel. "This is the bare minimum of decency owed to the citizens you claim to serve." He didn't wait for their reply. He simply turned and walked out, the heavy door thudding shut behind him like the closing of a vault. Outside, under the late afternoon sun, Marcus Reed paused. The air smelled different somehow, sharper, more electric. He knew this wasn't over. It was just the first hill in a much bigger war. But for the first time in a long time, he felt something stir in his chest, something he hadn't allowed himself in years. Not anger, not bitterness, but a thin, solid thread of hope. Real hope. Earned, demanded, fought for. He adjusted his duffel on his shoulder, set his jaw, and stepped into the waiting SUV. There was work to be done, and Marcus Reed was ready to finish what he'd started. "We have a breaking update coming out of Hamilton National," barked the editor-in-chief of WNN News, throwing down a stack of printouts onto the conference table. Every reporter in the room snapped to attention. Big screens on the walls played footage from the airport. Marcus Reed walking calmly through. Crowds, speaking softly but carrying the whole room's weight with him. Clips of chanting passengers. The apology broadcast. And now, rumors of federal meetings behind closed doors. The young producer, Emily, stared at her tablet in shock. "Sir, he's not just trending. He's dominating the entire news cycle." The editor, a gray-bearded veteran who had seen scandals, wars, elections come and go, shook his head slowly. "This isn't a moment," he said. "This is a movement." Phones rang off the hook. Emails flooded in. Civil rights leaders were calling for reform, Politicians were issuing public statements faster than they could type them. Everyone, it seemed, wanted to be on the right side of history now, or at least be seen trying. "Get me a full-hour special," the editor barked. "Reed's background, his military service, his honors, his family. I want profiles. I want op-eds. I want this story everywhere by morning." Emily nodded furiously. "One more thing," the editor added, his voice dropping low. "Get him. Get Marcus Reed on camera. Exclusive." The whole room buzzed with energy. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was the story. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in a quiet hotel suite just outside Washington, D.C. The windows overlooked the Potomac River, the sunset bleeding gold and crimson across the water. His uniform jacket was neatly draped over a chair. His boots stood at perfect attention beside the bed. Marcus wore simple slacks and a black t-shirt now. Casual, comfortable, but still carrying himself with the same unbreakable posture. His phone vibrated on the nightstand. He picked it up. It was a text from an unknown number. "Sir, thank you for speaking up. I work at TSA. We see the bias every day. Please don't stop." Marcus stared at the screen for a long moment. Another vibration. Another message. "My son watched you today. He said he wants to be a good man in a uniform like the general. You gave him a hero." And another. "I'm a baggage handler at Hamilton. I'm white. I've seen the profiling. I was scared to say anything. I'm not scared anymore, thank you." Marcus put the phone down slowly. His heart, steady as a war drum through all the chaos, skipped once. Not from fear, from responsibility. This wasn't just about him anymore. It never really had been. At the airport, Danielle Brooks was still at Gate 12, refusing to leave. The terminal was calmer now, but not silent. Groups of travelers lingered, talking quietly, some still chanting under their breath every so often. Respect, dignity, justice. Danielle uploaded her latest video, footage of Marcus's final speech stitched with clips from passengers chanting, airport officials sweating, children holding homemade signs. She hit post and watched it fly. Thousands of likes within minutes. Comments pouring in. People begging for updates. People promising to stand wherever injustice tried to hide next. Danielle looked up at the ceiling, eyes shining. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But today she had seen a man tear down a wall without shouting, without violence, without hate. He had done it by standing still, by refusing to shrink, by existing loudly in a space that wanted him small. Later that night, Greg Simmons sat alone in his office. The departure boards were still glitching from all the flight chaos. The terminal still smelled faintly of burnt coffee and anxiety. Greg loosened his tie and stared at the mountain of paperwork piling on his desk. Internal reviews, complaint investigations, federal inquiries. The airport's name was everywhere now, and not in the way he had built his career to achieve. Hamilton National wasn't a prestigious travel hub anymore. It was a symbol, a scar, and it would be for a long, long time. Greg knew deep down he'd be forced to resign, maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. Because when the world changed, even a little, the old guards always fell first. He leaned back in his chair, staring up at the flickering fluorescent lights. Marcus Reed had walked into his airport and left a fault line running through the foundation, and there wasn't a thing Greg Simmons could do to stop it. At his hotel, Marcus stood by the window as night settled over the city. Cars moved like veins of light far below. News helicopters buzzed somewhere distant. The whole nation pulsed with a new unsteady heartbeat. Marcus lifted his phone and sent one quiet text to a man he trusted at the Pentagon. "Ready when you are. Let's finish what we started." He set the phone down, folded his arms, and watched the darkness roll in, knowing full well the dawn he had just helped break was going to be brighter than anything this country had seen in a long time. "General Reed, the West Wing is expecting you," said the agent at the door, adjusting the earpiece tucked discreetly under his collar. Marcus gave a small nod and stepped inside, the heavy glass doors of the Eisenhower Executive Office building, closing behind him with a quiet thud. Inside, history oozed from the marble floors, the crown molding, the paintings of men who had shaped the country. many of whom had never imagined a black general would one day stride these halls demanding accountability. But Marcus wasn't here for symbolism. He was here for change. The kind you could touch. The kind you could feel. The kind no apology could undo if it wasn't delivered. In a small, private room just off the West Wing, a handful of powerful figures waited. Not politicians in suits looking for a photo op. These were the real architects, senior advisors, transportation officials, military liaisons, homeland security heads. Men. And women who knew how systems worked and how they broke. When Marcus entered, every chair shifted, every spine straightened. He didn't command the room with volume. He commanded it with presence. General Reed, a senior advisor said, standing. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Marcus simply nodded once. "I trust you know why you're here," the advisor continued. "I know exactly why," Marcus said. They didn't waste time. One woman, head of the newly forming task force, slid a heavy folder across the table. Marcus opened it. Inside were drafts for a sweeping executive order establishing a permanent Office of Civil Rights Oversight for all federal transportation hubs, mandating nationwide bias audits in every major airport within 6 months, funding grants for independent traveler protection groups, public tracking dashboards for transparency, immediate restructuring of TSA hiring, training, and promotion pipelines. Marcus read it carefully, line by line. No grand gestures, no empty slogans, real steps. He closed the folder. "It's a start," he said. The senior advisor exhaled, visibly relieved. "The president wants your support publicly, sir," he said carefully. "Your endorsement will mean credibility, unity." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying the room. His whole career, decades of service, sacrifice, invisible battles, had led to this moment. He thought of the young black boy at the airport, asking if he was a superhero. He thought of the security guard patting him down roughly like he was nothing. He thought of every tired parent, every kid, every traveler who would walk into an airport from now on, carrying less fear because of today. He thought of how thin and brittle the line between progress and betrayal could be. Finally, Marcus nodded once. "I'll support it," he said, "but only if it stays real. No burying it under red tape." The advisor nodded. "You have our word, sir." Marcus fixed him with a stare so sharp it left no doubt. "I don't need your word," he said. "I need your actions." The advisor swallowed hard. "Understood." Outside the White House, a growing crowd of reporters pressed against the gates, cameras flashing under the gray Washington sky. Someone spotted Marcus through the tinted windows of the waiting SUV. "That's him." "General Reed." "Over here, sir." The chanting started again, smaller but fierce. Respect, dignity, justice. Marcus didn't wave. He didn't smile. He didn't play to the cameras. He simply climbed into the SUV, shut the door quietly, and let the moment pass like a tide pulling the whole country forward, whether it was ready or not. Back at Hamilton National Airport, the ripple effect was beginning. New TSA banners hung in the terminals. Zero tolerance for bias, zero excuses. New complaint kiosks were being installed near every gate. Hiring booths, staffed by diverse recruiters, sprang up overnight. Mandatory sensitivity training courses started filling up fast. And word was, the FAA wasn't just checking boxes. They were watching now. Greg Simmons hunched over the paperwork in his cluttered office, signed his resignation letter with a heavy hand. He didn't bother cleaning out his desk. He knew he'd be a footnote in tomorrow's headlines. Airport director resigns amid discrimination scandal, and he deserved it. Because sometimes real change meant some people losing their chairs to make space for those who had been standing too long. That night, in her tiny apartment, Danielle Brooks sat cross-legged on her bed, uploading another video. Her voice was raw but proud. "We watched history today. We watched one man remind America of the promises it made, and the work it still owes. And we're not going back." She hit post, and let her phone buzz with notifications. Somewhere deep in her chest, she felt it. This was more than a story, it was a shift, the kind you told your kids about someday. "I was there," she would say. I saw it happen. And she had Marcus Reed to thank for it. In his hotel room, Marcus stood once again by the wide window, watching the city lights flicker like constellations trying to rearrange themselves into a new, better sky. He took a slow, deep breath. Tomorrow would be another fight, and the day after that, and the one after that. But tonight, he allowed himself one small, hard-earned truth. He hadn't just grounded flights today. He had helped lift a nation that too often forgot its own wings. Boarding Group 1, now boarding. The speaker crackled through the newly brightened concourse at Hamilton National Airport. Marcus Reed adjusted the strap of his duffel bag over his shoulder and moved forward slowly. The terminal looked different. Now not just in banners or slogans, but in the way eyes met his. Not suspicion, not fear, recognition, respect, small changes, invisible to some, obvious to those who had waited too long for them. As Marcus walked through security, a young TSA agent, a black woman with her hair in tight braids and her uniform pressed crisp, smiled warmly. "Good morning, General Reed," she said. Her voice didn't shake. Her gaze didn't drop. It was real. It was different. Marcus nodded. "Good morning." No drama this time. No extra searches. Just dignity exchanged silently between two people who knew what it had cost to get here. At the gate, Danielle Brooks stood in line holding her carry-on tightly. When she spotted Marcus approaching, her face lit up. She waved shyly. Marcus gave a small nod. Not because he was famous now, but because they were both passengers on a bigger journey now. One far beyond this airport. Far beyond today. Danielle mouthed two words as he passed. "Thank you." Marcus didn't need to reply. She knew. They all knew. On the tarmac, the airplane gleamed under the rising sun. A new morning, a new beginning. As Marcus boarded, a young white flight attendant smiled brightly. "Good morning, General Reed." "Thank you for your service," she said, genuine and unforced. Marcus paused, searching her face. Nothing but sincerity. He gave her a small nod. "Thank you." He took his seat by the window, row 1A first class, not because of money, not because of fame, but because respect had been claimed and earned and demanded, and finally, it had been given without conditions. As the plane taxied to the runway, Marcus leaned back against the seat and let his eyes drift closed for just a moment. The engines roared, the ground trembled, and then, slowly, surely, the wheels lifted off. The earth fell away beneath him. The airport, the struggle, the noise, all shrinking into the tapestry of a nation that had, for one small but unforgettable moment, remembered the best parts of itself. Marcus opened his eyes. The sun flooded the cabin with golden light. He didn't smile. He didn't weep. He simply sat there, steady and calm, a living monument to a truth no system could erase. Dignity doesn't ask. It stands. And when it stands long enough, the whole world has to move. Above the clouds, soaring into a new sky, General Marcus Reed, and the future he had helped bend toward justice, flew on.